everybody. How you doing today? I'm Karen Hartglass, and I'm here with my co-host Gary DeMattei for another episode of
It's All About Food.
Hi,
hey,
Gary.
Karen, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Great. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Nothing to complain about. Nothing in the news to talk about.
Nothing.
We're just here to riff about
Food.
Plant-based food, vegan food. What do you prefer? Do you prefer vegan or do you prefer plant-based?
You know, I was talking about this the other day with Nava Atlas about meats, and I like to call them plant meats. But I like the word vegan.
Yes.
It's clear.
It's clear. It sends a clear message.
Vegan.
Because you can be plant-based but also wear animals.
You could be plant-based and eat animals.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Plant-based means the base of your diet is plants, but you can add other things to it.
You can sprinkle other things on it.
Yes, and some of those sprinkles are pretty heavy in some groups that say that they promote a plant-based diet, but then they're eating a lot of animal in there. But still, there's more promotion for eating fruits and vegetables. We're recognizing that fiber is really important in the diet.
Fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds.
That's right.
That was what you had me memorize when we first started going out. How many years now?
A long time ago. I think I got that from EarthSave when
Right.
I was the executive director of EarthSave International, the nonprofit that was founded by John Robbins. Some of our taglines and mission statements had that in there.
Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And now, what would a mushroom be considered in that category? Fungus?
There's a fungus among us.
So let's do this. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, and fungi.
Yeah.
Or
Although
fungi.
I think mushrooms kind of get tossed in with vegetables.
You think?
Sometimes
Yeah.
in that category. But they are
that's
special, and they are wonderful foods, and you don't like them.
But I have them every day because I take a multivitamin that has mushrooms in it. And that's how I get my mushrooms.
That's right.
So every single day, a daily vitamin with mushrooms. And so far, I'm still here.
You're still here.
Speaking of mushrooms, what is your favorite mushroom dish? You notice the segue here. What do you like? How do you like your mushrooms prepared? Because today I was looking, a really cool thing happened today. I am very proud of myself. I was thinking about a recipe, and I didn't go to my phone. I went to a cookbook.
No!
Yeah.
What's a cookbook?
I didn't think about even looking for the recipe on the phone or on the internet. I was looking for a recipe for crepes because we wanted to make crepes, but we were making a buckwheat crepe today, right?
Yep.
And we were noticing that the buckwheat crepe that you have made time and time and time again was looking a little different.
It was looking dark.
It was looking darker than the...
And a lot of buckwheat crepes that we've seen made out in the real world, in restaurants.
So
and
we were surprised at that.
They're normally darker.
Right.
And ours were lighter. But today they were darker.
And we found out why.
That's right. Normally we buy raw buckwheat, and somehow some toasted buckwheats arrived.
Ended up in our refrigerator, and because we keep all of our whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds in the refrigerator. Not legumes. Not legumes.
There's not enough room for them.
I was just trying to repeat that. Anyway, so we were talking about crepes, or as you would say...
Crepe.
Thank you. And I thought, I used to do a buckwheat crepe recipe, and I immediately thought there was something in it. I wanted to find out if it was mixed with flour, so I went directly to one of my cookbooks instead of going on the phone to look up a buckwheat crepe recipe.
Now, this was not one of our over 150 vegan cookbooks that we have, but this was a
cookbook that I had brought with me from my other life, my pre-vegan life, my PV life,
Gary,
which I like to look at to adapt recipes.
Sure.
to a vegan life. Anyway, my point is...
What's your point?
I wasn't wearing powerful glasses when I was doing this. I was wearing just regular driving glasses. But, I can see in those. Anyway, the subject that I'm on now is about mushrooms, not about crepes. But there was in the index, I looked at something that I thought said crepes, but in reality, it said Cepes.
Ah, Cepes, j'adore.
Right, because it was a French cookbook that I was looking in.
Oh, what a great mushroom.
One of my old French cookbooks. And I wanted to ask you about Cepes on the show today. And if you've ever worked with them, what's the difference between a Cep and a mushroom? Would somebody who doesn't like mushrooms like Cepes? Or does it taste like a mushroom?
Yes.
All of those questions.
All of those questions. Really good. And I want to get to it. But can we just finish the buckwheat thing? Because we made a great discovery.
I was talking about two different things here.
No, it was a great...
Cepes and crepes. That's what happened with me. And that's what happens. And that's what I love about going into a book. Cracking a book. There's this great program on now. Martin Scorsese talks with Fran Lebowitz. And it's on Netflix. And she has, according to Fran, she has 10,000 books. She doesn't have a phone. She doesn't text. Well, she has a phone, but she doesn't have a phone that you carry around with you and look things up. She cracks a book. And I really felt that was refreshing. She's like the only one that walks down the streets of Manhattan not looking at their phone. I thought that was great. So anyway, let's go back to talking about crepes now, and then let's talk about Cepes. And the other question I have about Cepes and mushrooms is, I think it's the season for those things now. Finish the story about the crepes.
Right. So a while ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who tried to make our buckwheat crepe recipe. And we always use raw buckwheat.
Raw buckwheat. That's
and I
the key.
take the raw buckwheat kernels and I grind them in a Vitamix, and I make my own flour. Okay, everybody knows Karen likes to make her own flour. And it's an easy recipe. It's foolproof, I thought. And she didn't have success with it. And then when I finally visited her in California, where she lived, I tried to make my recipe with her buckwheat flour, and it didn't work. And I thought it was because the buckwheat flour she was using was toasted. So I clarified in the recipe that you should use raw buckwheat. But we just used the toasted buckwheat innocently, unknowing, ground it up, followed the recipe. It was a little thicker than I was used to, so I added a little bit more water.
A little chewier.
But it came out fine. The texture was a little different, but it was a perfect crepe.
It was.
And so my conclusion was that the flour my friend was using was...
rancid.
Old.
Possibly
rancid, but definitely old. And it just didn't work. I kept adding more and more water to it. It was a disaster. It just didn't do anything.
No. And your point is, we made it today with toasted buckwheat, and it was great.
Yeah, so the recipe works with raw or toasted buckwheat.
I prefer the raw version.
But you want your grains to be relatively fresh.
Yes, and in order to do that, you keep them in the refrigerator, even though they're probably stored in a warehouse somewhere. Not refrigerated. When you get them home, when you open them up, put them in the refrigerator.
Yeah, that's what we recommend here at Real Responsible Eating and Living Pandemic Headquarters.
And you know what? I'm looking forward to erasing pandemic from that slogan that you just announced. The Responsible Eating and Living Pandemic Headquarters. Aren't you?
Yes.
I know I am.
But it's going to take a few more months.
It's going to take some time. Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, the buckwheat crepes were great.
Okay, now let's
talk about Cepes.
Cepes. So we're not talking about crepes. We're talking about Cepes.
Which I confused when I was looking in the index of I think it was probably Escoffier, the cookbook that I brought with me from my previous life.
So a Cepe is a porcini mushroom.
Ah, it is a porcini mushroom.
And you don't see porcini very often, and they're very expensive.
Right.
But they are crazy delicious.
Yes. So there are lots of recipes for Cepes in the Escoffier cookbook.
And when I lived in France, I don't know if it was the same, but I would have a Cepe that was served to me in a restaurant that was really big, like a portobello.
Right. Right. Okay.
Oh my goodness. So chewy and so flavorful.
Now, if anyone out there has any wonderful experiences with Cepes, if you know any mushroom people in your family, or maybe you are a mushroom person and you think you have a great recipe, a great plant-based recipe for Cepes, let us know and we'll try it. I won't eat any of it, but Karen loves mushrooms.
Well, I also think that some of it has to do with where the mushroom is grown.
Right.
And this is true of all plant food. It's going to have a different flavor based on where it's grown. What's in the soil, what the soil is fed, what's in the water. All food like that is going to have a different flavor. We'll talk about wines and the terroir and how the grape that goes into a different wine is important because of the locale where it comes from. But I found that even the simple white mushroom, I would buy these sliced, frozen white mushrooms
The white
in
caps,
France.
right?
Yes. And they had the most incredible flavor
Right.
that I have not found here.
Right.
So what is that?
You're talking about when you were in France.
Yeah, so that was the terroir.
Right. The ground that it's grown in.
Very important. And I don't know about how people are starting to grow mushrooms from kits, and there are all these newfangled ways where you can grow mushrooms. I don't know how that affects the flavor. I'm sure it does.
Well, it just seems like mushroom weather now. A lot of creamy, saucy, mushroomy dishes. I feel left out because I don't like them. But I know that a lot of folks are probably going to be cooking with them because you can use dried mushrooms in the wintertime, right?
Right, and powders.
And
You've used powders.
I've used powders. And I know I've said this on this program before, I have enjoyed a mushroom at PS Kitchen in Manhattan.
A Maitake mushroom.
A Maitake mushroom. I did enjoy that. That tasted unlike anything I've ever eaten before. And they did it with a buffalo sauce. Like, the buffalo wings that are so popular.
It has a chewier texture, which I think you appreciated, because some people who don't like mushrooms don't like that texture that a lot of mushrooms have.
But I do like using mushroom powders. It doesn't bother me. And I liked the maitakes when they were drenched in that hot buffalo sauce.
Yeah.
And they were deep fried. All of the bad things. And they were crispy on the outside.
I have to admit, I'm really missing lion's mane mushrooms, especially when we used to go to the vegetarian house in San Jose.
Yes, we're missing a lot of our favorite restaurants. Last night, we were sitting in our apartment, and we were overwhelmed with the smell of Chinese food.
It was probably next door.
It was probably next door, and it was coming into our apartment, and we looked online to see if our favorite vegan Chinese restaurant was open yet, and
it's not.
It's not. You actually called them on the telephone.
And I got that boo-doo-doo, the number you have reached.
So I thought it was unfair of the neighbor to have Chinese food next door to us because we couldn't participate.
Well, they don't care, and
I know.
I know it's what they were eating wasn't vegan.
But a lot of things are happening now. A lot of things are happening for vegans and for plant-based eaters and for people who just want to cut back on their meat consumption. I was reading the other day that Trader Joe's is now going to be getting a vegan seafood. Vegan seafood is coming. Trader Joe's may be launching their own vegan seafood to meet the growing demand for plant-based products.
So I always wonder about Trader Joe's because they seem to repackage other people's products.
Sure.
And there's a lot of new vegan seafoods out there, so I wonder if it's really theirs or if they're packaging somebody else's.
Right. So someone reported this on one of the vegan sites, and it said that on an episode of the Supermarkets podcast, I didn't know Trader Joe's had a podcast. Inside Trader Joe's, Amy Gaston Morales, the chain's category manager of deli, frozen meat, seafood, meatless, fresh beverages, talked about the potential new offering. And she said, "I'm looking to do more work on the seafood side," she said, when asked about vegan products she wants to develop. She explained that while Trader Joe's offers a full spectrum of plant-based meats, vegan seafood is one category the chain hasn't explored. So, I'm thinking, why bother? Have you ever had a vegan seafood?
Yes.
I have at the aforementioned vegetarian house, and to me, it always tasted rubbery.
Yeah, the shrimp tasted rubbery.
Very much so.
Well, there are some vegan tunas out there and some vegan crab cakes and...
And I'm just going to repeat what we've repeated on this show numerous times, ad nauseum. You want vegan tuna, you got to get Okara.
Okara. I got to make some Okara.
And for those of you who don't know what Okara is, Karen, take it away.
There was a phrase for what Okara was that wasn't very pleasing. The leftover soy pulp or soy... Anyway, when you take a soybean and then you cook it so it's soft, and then you blend it a little bit with water, and then you put it through a sieve or nut milk bag, you squeeze it, and you get the soy milk, and the leftover fiber is...
Okara. And it's delicious. And now let's talk about...
And it's great to make a tuna salad with Okara.
Right, let's talk about what gives it a fishy flavor. I know you've talked about it a million times on this program, but let's talk about it 1,000,001 times.
Dulse.
Right, and that's the same thing that fish eat, right?
Dulse is a sea vegetable.
A sea vegetable. So the fish eat these sea vegetables that taste like
the sea.
Like the sea.
The salty sea.
The fish that you're eating tastes like the sea.
It's like the terroir we were talking about before. So.
Everything is pre-planned on this program. We're tying it all together. There's the ground, the earth where the mushrooms are grown, where the grapes are grown, where the vegetables are grown on outside of the ocean. And there's the terroir inside the ocean. And that gives the taste. So why bother with frozen vegan fish fillets? Why bother with anything that you have to then pretend is something else like meat? Just go directly to your soybean, and everything you need to know is in that wonderful miracle bean. And it can taste like your favorite tuna salad by adding a little seaweed to it, a little dried seaweed.
Wow.
Yeah, you made some great maki the other night. I took a video of you making it. Oh. That's also a lovely dish to sprinkle a little dulse in if you want your maki to taste like you have a California roll, which is crab. Now, I would think that we could take some of the Okara tuna salad, Okara, mix it with some avocado, roll it up in the maki, and you would have that Okara.
We just think of new recipes right here. You're witnessing this, folks.
This would be a good thing.
This would be a good thing.
Now, if somebody doesn't want to go out and buy a nut milk bag, they could use what?
Well, if they have a fine mesh sieve.
A fine mesh sieve would work, but you recommend people go out and buy a nut milk bag.
Yeah, and some nut milk bags are better than others. And if you want to know the one that we recommend, send us an email at info@realmeals.org.
Yes, and we will let you know.
Send you a link.
And nut milk bags are very handy for making nut milks. Not just Okara.
Not just soy milk.
Right.
But for nut milk. Absolutely.
Yeah. You could have called it a soy milk bag, but you said a nut milk bag, so I wanted to clarify that you can use a nut milk bag not only for soy milk, but also for nut milk.
And for seeds.
Am I sounding nuts?
Yes.
Okay, I think I've cracked.
I wanted to just go back a moment.
Yes, let's go
back.
About
seafood, because there was one seafood product I had a few years ago. I have not seen it in a while. I was
going to ask you that.
And I know it's out there. I interviewed the founder of Sophie's Vegan Kitchen, and he disappeared for a while, or his products disappeared for a while, but I know they're out there.
So it's Sophie's Vegan Kitchen, but it was a male who you were talking to, a guy.
Sophie's his daughter.
Sophie's his daughter.
His daughter. And they make a vegan lox that is amazing. Now, I have to say that when I was a kid and lox was offered with the cream cheese and bagels, I wasn't that interested in it. But the vegan lox tasted a lot like lox, as I remember, but better.
Right. And we looked for it one day, remember? We went to a grocery store and we looked for it because we heard that this grocery store was a specialty store and that it was sold there, but we couldn't find it.
Couldn't find it.
Well, there's a bunch of great recipes for vegan lox that you use carrots.
Sure.
And again, dulse, this program is all about dulse today, is an ingredient, right?
I believe so.
Yes.
There's lots of different carrot lox recipes out there, but...
There are carrot hot dog recipes.
Oh, yeah, we have to do that too.
Well, because you make sauerkraut.
Yes.
You like sauerkraut?
Yes, and the interesting thing about sauerkraut, since you brought it up, sauerkraut, fermented vegetables, I don't know how true this is. There was an article that came out a few months ago that was saying that countries who ate a lot of sauerkraut and fermented vegetables had lower death rates to COVID-19.
Wow.
Now, it was a correlation.
Right.
And anybody that looks at these studies or understands math knows that correlation is not causation. There could be other things that are also at work in those countries that had the lower death rates that also eat a lot of sauerkraut and fermented vegetables. Right. But a lot of people feel that cabbage, especially, it's one of those cruciferous vegetables. It's very nutritious. And then you ferment it and you get all these extra probiotics. So it's a great food. I love it.
Right. And it's also something that I associate with this time of the year. Eating pickled things I associate with this time of the year because you can't get that many fresh vegetables.
Well, you can now. It's the 21st century.
Yeah, so then why do I associate that
because
with
back in the old days...
I'm showing my age.
When transportation wasn't as amazing as it is today, people ate locally.
Right.
And if you couldn't grow something, or if you grew a ton of it, they ate seasonally and locally.
Seasonally, which... Also. So
in the summer and in the autumn, when you had a harvest, you grew more than you needed, and you canned and pickled and...
And you're doing some of that here at home. You bought some jars with some little vents.
I said last week that I was going to post, or I was going to update my sauerkraut recipe, and I didn't. Mea culpa. But I will do that this week, I hope. And it'll show all the nifty little pictures of the jars that I've been using. Not the jars, but the tops of the jars.
And everybody knows that we keep our sauerkraut in the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, when it's fermenting. Then when it's done, it goes in the refrigerator.
Right, but when it's fermenting, we keep it in the dishwasher because we no longer use our dishwasher. We wash our dishes by hand now. Not because we're trying to do anything spectacularly efficient with electricity, but we found that our dishwasher throws one of our breakers and we have to get that fixed.
We have to get the whole apartment rewired, and that's not going to happen. So we don't use the dishwasher.
It's not going to happen just yet. Maybe it'll happen in 6 months when the theater's open and we go back to work. Anyway, your sauerkraut is really good. Did you notice that I even had some the other day?
You had a little bit.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
It was really great. And now I want to make a vegan hot dog out of a carrot.
There you go.
So I will report back when I've done that.
With the sauerkraut.
Yes.
A little mustard, a little sauerkraut.
Yeah.
And a vegan carrot.
You know, these winter dishes that I'm craving now. You put one of them up on our website. The meatloaf, which I'm putting air quotes around meat, that we make out of our world burger recipe. I'm really craving that with some garlic mashed potatoes and some steamed greens.
Yeah.
It's not made with any fake meats. It's made with 3 different kinds of rice, sometimes 4, depending on how ambitious we are.
Brown rice, red rice, black rice, sometimes millet.
Yeah. And some of that rice is called forbidden. But don't let that throw you, because you can still buy it, even though it's forbidden. It's forbidden rice. So what I'm basically getting at this podcast, this production today, is that there's a lot of products that are out there on the market, but you can make them pretty simply at home without buying them. Like fake meat. We try to talk about that all the time.
Plant meat.
Yeah, plant meat.
I like calling it plant meat. It's not fake. It's real food.
Exactly. But I mean, the stuff that they make in factories and then ship to places like Trader Joe's and freeze, and it wastes a lot of energy. I'm not condemning that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because anytime we can get people not to eat animals
is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
But you can make a nice, flavorful meatloaf with grains.
Plant meatloaf. Okay.
A plant meatloaf.
A plant meatloaf. Yes, and we have an excellent recipe up there.
Can you talk about how you make your greens?
Yes, I would love to. The way I cook my greens, well, it depends on the greens.
And it depends on the cuisine, too, because the kind of greens you just made with the ginger may not be the right seasoning for a meatloaf.
No. We had a dinner last night that went well together. We had a wonderful, I guess it was an Asian fusion kind of meal.
Yeah, especially after smelling the Chinese food next door.
Yeah, and that's what inspired me to do it. The other thing that inspired me to do it was we had these 2 bunches of kale that needed to be cooked, and I wanted to steam the kale with some onions, some celery, and some fresh ginger, because you bought a bunch of fresh ginger and I want to start using it, and some garlic. And so you just take a big pot, the same kind of pot you would boil soup in, for 2 heads of kale. Chop it up with the stems and all.
With the stems, because the stems are full of wonderful nutrition.
Right. And I like the stems, the consistency of like an asparagus spear after it's been steamed. I like them a little softer than some folks might like their kale stems a little crunchier. I like mine a little softer. So I steam it a little longer. Now, I say steam, but I'm not steaming it. I'm putting the kale in the pot. I'm chopping a large onion, 2 cloves of garlic, and 1, what is the terminology?
It's about an inch of ginger.
Oh, yeah, you measure it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about 1.5 inches of ginger. Chop that up. Sprinkle that all together. Pour about 2 cups of water at the bottom of the pot. Put the lid on it. Turn it up. Let it boil. Turn it down. Let it steam for about a half hour or until it's the consistency you want. And then, at the last minute, I add some miso to the water, and it's all you do. And then I steam some, again, I said steam, I don't mean steam. I boiled some millet, and I made some tofu. So
the water that the greens are cooking in, they're kind of steaming in, but you get a nice broth.
You get a beautiful broth.
It's delicious. Infused, with the ginger and the little bit of miso. It's just incredible.
It's infused with the ginger and the miso and the celery, and you don't need any salt. And you put that in a bowl, and you put a nice scoop of millet on top of that, and your baked tofu, and it was a wonderful meal.
Really good. Bravo.
And
I just love that ginger miso broth.
Yeah, it's delicious. So I always add a little miso broth to the steaming.
Ginger miso broth with greens.
With greens.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that was because, as you mentioned, we smelled the Chinese food last night, and it brought me back to when we used to go to Green Zenfany down the street here from our apartment and get our big pile of greens every time we went in.
Yeah. You're getting better and better at making greens.
Well, thanks.
Especially with the stems. I like when you do spinach, too, with the stems.
Yeah, I always do spinach with the stems. I never remove the stems from spinach. The stems are easy.
But then you have to be really careful to chew.
Well, the thing about greens, especially spinach, is you have to be really careful when you're cleaning it. I do the restaurant method, which is I clean it, I wash it 3 times. So that's really important.
Yeah, get all the grit out. But the stems of spinach and then some of those other Asian greens.
We do collards.
That we've been served at Green Zenfany and other places. They're really great to eat, but you have to be careful because they're like stringy.
Oh, as far as choking, yes.
Yeah, choking. There's that.
Yeah, you
want to chew.
Well, as you mentioned, you need to chew them very well. These are these hearty greens that we're still getting a lot of them.
And I like that you have to chew them because it makes you more mindful about chewing them because most of us don't chew our food enough in the mouth.
Right.
And this way you have to.
Exactly. You're going to be seeing a lot more greens around here because of this winter seasonal menu that we're on here at Responsible Eating and Living Now. The Cruciferous Greens. You mentioned the cabbage.
Yeah.
And that still grows. I know a lot of flower beds are planted in this. I noticed this in New York, that a lot of people, as we're walking down the street, plant kale, the decorative kale, in their flower beds during the winter.
Yep.
And every time I walk by it, I feel like picking some of it and bringing it home and
chewing
cooking
on
it up. It's that really beautiful, colorful kale, and it grows well in the snow. Kale is delicious, especially the way we've prepared it here.
Yeah, it's a good winter vegetable.
Yeah, and of
here
course,
in New York.
You can always juice your kale as well, which we've done a lot of around here. You know, we've had some great weather, and I'm still waiting for our big snow and freezing temperatures. So far, we've only had one little snowfall. But what's some of your favorite winter dishes? What are you looking forward to this winter, in the winter of our discontent? Made glorious summer by these fabulous dishes.
Well, I'll tell you what I would do, thinking about January dishes, is I would go to responsibleeatingandliving.com.
Yes.
Scroll over to the right side of the homepage.
Yes.
And go down a little bit where you have the real recipe index. And there is, under holiday seasons category,
Veganuary dishes. That's what we were getting at.
January,
Veganuary
dishes.
This is Veganuary. And all of this babbling has been about the fact that you need to visit the site to get some ideas on your Veganuary dishes. Whether you're vegan or not, we want you to go vegan for the rest of the month of January because it is called Veganuary.
Yeah, now Veganuary is very popular. It's become more and more popular over the years. I remember speaking to the founders of Veganuary, Matthew Glover and Jane Land, 5 years ago.
Right.
And this was when Veganuary had been around for about a year. I think they started
it was founded in
2014.
2014. Exactly.
There you go.
And Veganuary is an annual challenge run by a UK nonprofit organization that promotes and educates about veganism. Hey, we do that by encouraging people to follow a vegan lifestyle for the month of January. Well, we are getting to this a couple of weeks late, but still better late than never. Since the event began in 2014, participation has more than doubled each year. 400,000 people signed up to the 2020 campaign. Wow.
Wow.
So check it out.
Yeah, they do a really good job with marketing. I think that was their background originally, so they really knew how to put this out there. And the smart thing about Veganuary is it's a new year. People are making resolutions. This is something they can jump into. And the idea is that you just do it for a month. But then, when you realize how good you feel and how it's not that difficult, you think, maybe I could do this
a little
for
longer.
February.
Yeah, and how many
so
animals you've saved and how you've helped reverse climate change. And so you talked with Matthew Glover and Jane Land.
I did.
And we'll have to post that interview. So folks...
Oh yeah, I could put that up on the homepage. But the thing you were asking me is, what am I looking forward to? And I am a big soup lover.
Right.
And this is the season for soup.
Right, and that's what we had last night with the steamed, for all intents and purposes.
It was soupy. It was brothy.
It was soup. It was brothy. And it was great.
And then I made a few days ago a red lentil soup. And it was one of these kitchen sink kind of deals. Now, I love red lentils. I love them because they cook quickly and then they melt.
Yeah, they were great.
They just melt. And some people say you don't have to soak lentils and that you won't get the gas that other beans give you. And I will tell you that is not true in my gut. I don't know about your gut, but lentils make me gassier than other beans. Right. And I find that if I do soak them, it helps tremendously.
Right.
And those red lentils cook really fast. So I'm not soaking them to make them cook more quickly. I'm soaking them so I don't have gas. And I soaked them for about 8 hours, and it made a big difference.
Can I tell you?
Gas-wise. Yes.
I haven't noticed.
I have. Anyway, sometimes when I make beans and they're freshly cooked, I just love them plain.
Right.
Especially when they're organic, excellent quality. We're kind of nuts over our food to live orders that we're getting of beans.
We're kind of nuts over the nuts we're getting.
The beans taste so good. But I decided to add a can. We don't use canned food very much, but we did buy a case of canned jackfruit.
Yeah,
from Edward and Sons.
Edward and Sons. They make great products.
And we bought a lot of plain jackfruit, but we also bought a few of their yellow curry and red curry jackfruit cans, which comes with coconut milk. And
delicious.
It's delicious, but I like adding it to something else because then it's not as salty and it's not as rich, but still rich enough.
Right. And for those of our listeners out there who don't know anything about jackfruit, what is jackfruit?
Jackfruit is a fruit. It's a big fruit. It's a tropical fruit, but it has this very nice, chewy, meaty texture.
Right. It's like a pulled pork texture.
Sure.
After you cook it for hours and hours and hours, it has this pulled pork kind of texture.
So it's great to use as a plant meat, and you can season it as such, but you want to keep in mind that it is not very high in protein because it's a fruit. Now, all fruits contain all the essential amino acids we need to make protein,
right?
But it's not a high protein source. So I thought it would be great to mix it with the lentils.
And it was
and
delicious.
Get all these different flavors and textures. It was really yummy.
Yes, and jackfruit officially is an exotic fruit grown in tropical regions of the world. It is native to South India. It is part of the Moraceae plant family, which also includes fig, mulberry, and breadfruit. Jackfruit has a spiky outer skin and is green or yellow in color. One unique aspect which you mentioned of jackfruit is its unusually large size, and that's what makes it so, I would imagine, economical, right? You can do a lot with jackfruit.
Yeah, and a lot of the jackfruit that we have access to that comes in cans is flaked and very small in size.
Right.
But you can actually get like a steak of jackfruit,
right, and
which is amazing.
So we bought it in the can and we added it to this soup you made, and it was a very nice addition. What I'd like to do, and I'm just a novice at jackfruit, is I'd like to buy it in that form that you just mentioned and practice cooking it, because I would imagine that and this is nothing against Edward and Sons, you and I could come up with a really great version of jackfruit.
Yeah.
And so some of the other Veganuary dishes on our site are mouth-watering. We have this red bean and millet burger. We have a miso vegetable soup. We have a vegan ramen noodle soup, which is unbelievable. Polenta. It's polenta weather. I mean, come on. Who doesn't love polenta with roasted garlic and basil? We have a vegan pho recipe, or pho, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And again, we have lots of collard greens, salad with baked tofu, cream of celery soup, chickpea stew, Moroccan soup, tom kha Thai coconut soup, real pot pies, which is your version of...
Real pot pies.
Yes, we're going to have to... this is pot pie weather.
It is.
It is pot pie weather.
Thanks for bringing that up. I thought of it and then I forgot, but I have to make pot pies.
Yes.
That was a favorite thing that I used to have as a kid. One of those Swanson frozen pot pies.
Yes. Now we can do them and we won't be killing ourselves with horrible ingredients.
No.
And one of my favorite soups is minestrone. I wonder why.
It's Italian.
Yeah. Some other Veganuary dishes that you've made before and introduced me to, and we were talking about buckwheat earlier, is Kasha with onions.
You like Kasha?
Yeah, that's a great dish.
You like Kasha?
Never had it until I
Nobody knows
you.
what I'm doing, but I have to do this. I do this in memory of my maternal grandfather, Al Levy. When we were kids, he would say, You like Kasha?
Yeah, exactly. We say that all the time.
I can't help it.
It's great. Enchiladas. That's something we haven't made in a while, and that's a great winter Veganuary dish.
And I have homemade tortillas.
We're going to have to make some enchiladas.
We can make enchiladas with.
Your homemade tortillas are amazing.
Okay, who's made their own tortillas? Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. I haven't. I flipped them.
You are a good flipper.
I'm a flipper.
They're so easy to make. I don't know why everybody doesn't make them, but
They're
I don't
delicious.
know why everybody doesn't do a lot of things that I spend hours doing.
We had this wonderful brunch on Sunday, and we were silent, and we were cooking for about an hour straight, and when we were done, we had homemade tortillas, we had a homemade tofu scramble, we had homemade home fries, we had guacamole. It was just the greatest brunch.
It was, and we thought about Organic Grill.
We were thinking of Organic Grill.
Which is a restaurant that we like a lot.
We were talking about what would be the favorite restaurant that you have that you would go to. I was actually dreaming about Organic Grill the night before. I was dreaming about their undecided plate for brunch.
Yes, the undecided plate.
Right?
Is when you're undecided and you want everything.
You want everything.
So they give you everything.
You want stir fry. You want
tofu scramble. You want potatoes.
You want
the
home
pancakes.
fries. You want pancakes. You want everything. And so I just said when I woke up on Sunday, Organic Grill. I can't go there right now, but it's one of the restaurants that I would love to go to. So I'm going to try and recreate Organic Grill right here in our Queens apartment. Because I must confess, I have not been into Manhattan since last year. Since March.
Almost a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since March.
Even though you promised all of us that you would go to Manhattan.
I know.
And he didn't do it, folks.
I'm a coward. But I will go to Manhattan soon, and I'll let everybody know when I do.
Okay. Let me know, too.
Yeah, I will. Well, I mean, where would you go if you could go to your favorite restaurant in Manhattan? One of mine is Organic Grill for brunch.
I'm craving some vegan Chinese food.
So you would go to New Bodai.
New Bodai or Buddha Bodai. There's a few different ones. One's in Queens and there's a few in Manhattan, definitely.
I would definitely hit all of our favorites downtown.
Yeah.
Ya.
Oh, yeah. Is that ya or ha ha ha?
Ha ha ha.
Yeah, that Mexican place, really good.
It's fantastic.
And what's amazing is they just keep opening new stores.
A lot of people are opening restaurants. It's very, very encouraging. If you can open a restaurant during coronavirus pandemic, you must really be passionate. Okay,
so we talked about a lot of different dishes here and things that we've been making or thinking about making. Let's talk about dates for a minute.
You mean like dating?
Let's talk about the food, the fruit, dates.
This has to be discussed because I love
Now we
dates.
buy dates in bulk. We get them from foodtolive.com. I mentioned them before. They're medjool dates, organic, are excellent, and we just got the best shipment ever from them. The softest, gooeyest dates
They
ever.
were wonderful.
And it made us go online and read about dates.
Right. We just couldn't believe that something like this could also taste great before it was dried. I thought these have to be poisoned before they dry them or something. But
no.
It turns out they're actually quite delicious.
Yellow dates. Has anybody had a fresh date? And where did you get it? Because we want to try some.
That has several different meanings, but you know what we're talking about. A fresh date, not the kind of date that you would slap for being fresh, but a fresh date that
the fruit.
The fruit.
The fruit. Yeah, so I want to try some fruit dates that aren't dried.
Yeah, and where do you get them? That's a good question.
Well, we live in New York City, so I think we can find them.
We must be able to get them somewhere.
Someday when the pandemic's over and we go back to stores.
Right. Well, we've actually walked into a couple of stores, even during the pandemic. But you do this thing, and you've probably talked about it on the show before, but you do this thing where you take dates and you put them in the food processor and you make balls. You are a baller, my friend. You are a baller.
Yeah, when I spoke with...
These date balls are unbelievable.
When I spoke with Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, I whipped up a new recipe that I called Brooklyn Borough Balls. But I've been making more of them lately, just because we're not big dessert people, but this is the perfect dessert.
Oh, it is.
So I'll take a cup of nuts and seeds and a cup of dried fruit. So the batch that I just made was half a cup of pecans and half a cup of sunflower seeds. And I put them in a food processor with these incredibly fresh dates. I counted them. It was about 13 that I pitted to fill up a cup.
Right.
And I blended them together in a food processor, not a high-powered blender. This is not a blender item.
You used a Cuisinart.
This is a food processor project.
You used a Cuisinart, right.
I also added this time, I like to flavor them differently, but I added some carob. Last week when I made them, I added chocolate by mistake. I wanted to add carob, but I forgot, and it looked similar. So I put in the cocoa powder, and I felt bad.
And you're the one that's always saying, chocolate is not carob.
They're not.
Carob is not chocolate.
But I grabbed the chocolate instead. My subconscious was doing it, I don't know what, but I felt bad because you don't like to have caffeine. And there's caffeine in chocolate.
But it was great.
But it was great. I also added, well, I don't add it to the batch, but I blend it up. And the way it works in a food processor is it chops them all up. And then as it gets finer and finer, it turns into a big ball of dough.
Right.
And then I take that out and I make little balls out of them. And then I roll them in coconut.
Your balls are great, Karen. They're amazing.
And then I put them in the freezer a little bit. They get a little firm. And it's an incredible dessert. And what is it? Dates?
It's fruit and nuts.
Fruit and nuts.
Well, it was inspired by one of our favorite grocery stores, again, in Manhattan, Westerly.
Yeah.
And when we'd go into Manhattan for auditions, we'd always stop, or at least I would. I'd always stop at Westerly and pick up some... I mean, when you're in Manhattan and you're near Westerly, you have to go in and you have to buy whatever you need.
Well, they also have a great juice bar, so you could go and get a green juice.
So I would go get some green juices, and then I would go to the bulk food section at Westerly and get one of these date logs that's covered in coconut.
So that's just dates and coconut.
It's processed dates, just like you would put them in a food processor, and I don't think they put nuts in them or anything.
No, it's just coconut and dates.
Unbelievable. But your balls are so much better.
I could make the dates with coconut, but I like adding the nuts and seeds to it.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And you chill them, like you said, and then you have them at night with a little mint tea. It's delicious.
I think they're kind of elegant looking, too. They're like truffles.
They look like truffles.
And once we added some alcohol to them, and we called them boozy balls.
Boozy balls.
That recipe's our responsible eating living,
That's right. We add a little whiskey to them.
Mm-hmm.
A little whiskey in your balls never hurts.
So you can have a lot of fun with these. A cup of nuts and seeds and a cup of dried fruit. Now that dried fruit could be raisins, could be apricots, it could be fig. Organic, please.
Yeah, go organic
please.
Too. Go vegan in January and February and March. And go organic as well.
And you could use nuts and seeds. If you're going to use walnuts, be careful because walnuts get oily. So light on the walnuts, otherwise your balls are going to be greasy.
And pretty soon we're going to start seeing more and more grocery stores that are completely vegan. That's another thing that's been in the news lately. I saw this on Veg News in the Veg News magazine that there is a Black-owned vegan grocery store to open locations in every major city in the U.S. city by 2024. Vegan Fine Foods founder Stephen Smith is hosting another equity crowdfunding raise in an effort to expand the gourmet grocery store across the country. All vegan grocery store and cafe, Vegan Fine Foods in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, recently announced plans to open locations in every major city in the United States by 2024. Parent company Vegan Fine Brands, Inc., which encompasses the 5,000 square foot Vegan Fine Food Store, Vegan Fine Body Product line, and Vegan Fine Cafe, is currently hosting an equity crowdfunding raise on platform Start Engine to expand its retail arm across the country through both company and franchise-run locations. Vegan Fine Brands has so far raised more than $105,000. I wish them so much luck.
You know what's interesting about all of this in my mind? It's like a chicken and egg thing. Which came first? The interest in vegan food or the access to vegan food, the vegan food stores and stuff? And I know the answer. So a vegan food store could not have been successful until now.
Right.
And I know people that had opened them in the early 2000s.
Really?
It was an all-vegan grocery store, and they couldn't make it.
Wow.
And the time is right now. So
Yes.
not only is it because there's investors that are interested, they're interested because they know the market is there, that they can capitalize on it, make money, and now the momentum's going to build because when there's more access, it's easier for people to take advantage of it. And that'll just make it grow even more.
I think that's some really good news.
It's good news.
Yes, and I couldn't be more supportive of something like that. So we're going to have to keep an eye on how this is going.
Sure. And I would love to shop in a vegan-only grocery store.
Yeah, that's the one thing that bums me out all the time now about walking into a grocery store is when I have to walk by that butcher counter and smell the blood and the meat.
I remember Staff of Life in Santa Cruz, which is a grocery store that we love to go to.
We love Staff of Life.
And we haven't been there, obviously, in over a year. But when Staff of Life started, they did not have meat in that store.
And they put it in there because they had to.
They had to, financially, to stay afloat. They had to sell meat.
It was a lot of pressure on them.
And that's sad. But maybe it'll be able to change again.
Right. Well, I wish them luck at the Vegan Fine Foods in Fort Lauderdale. I hope they can get this crowdfunding thing going.
Now, we have a few shops in New York City that are all vegan, but they're small.
Right.
So we have Riverdale in Brooklyn, which is a cheese shop. It's a lot of fun. It's all vegan.
We have the Mushu's Market.
Mushu's has their vegan market in Manhattan. I think there's a few more that have opened. I can't keep track of them all.
Right.
But no grocery stores where you can get everything you need.
This is really a good thing. I'd like to see more of these happen.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to wrap up the show today, Gary, because here we are out of time.
I do too, and nothing really exciting happening tomorrow in the world, so so we won't talk about that.
We won't talk about the regime change.
We will just say good luck, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Stay strong, stay safe.
And go vegan in January. You still have a couple of weeks left.
That's right.
Or not quite a couple of weeks, but you have enough time.
You have time. And if it doesn't start in January, it'll be good. You can do a
Febanuary. Febanuary.
Oh no,
January.
Brewery. Okay, it's not.
Veganuary.
Veganuary, there you go.
Veganuary.
Veganuary. Oh, now we got it. Veganuary.
Veganuary.
Okay, if you don't make it to January, there's always
Veganuary.
Veganuary.
Veg Brewery.
Veg Brewery. Okay.
Veg Brewery.
Oh.
I'm going to give you a bunch more of those. Veg Brewery. All right.
Brewery. All right.
Caryn, it was great to be on your show today. Thanks so much. I know next week you have a couple of great guests.
Next week, I'm talking to the author of the Edible Book Series edition, Saffron.
Right.
And the following week, another edition from the Edible Book Series on vanilla.
Saffron and vanilla. How exotic.
Yes.
Oh, I can't wait to listen to those. And then I'm going to join you later to wrap things up.
Oh, always.
So I'll be back.
You'll be back.
Okay.
Okay, everybody.
Be back.
Thanks for joining us.
And have a delicious week.
Mm-hmm.